Welcome to Wayne's Word. Our mayor, the mayor of Colorado Springs, Yemi Mobolade, has in recent days received some of the most horrific threats I have ever heard in my life. We're going to play some of them, and we're going to get into a discussion with his chief of staff about his security details. Stay tuned.
Hey, just so you know, before I go off, I want you to know who it is. That way we can be clear here. I was the business owner who you Yemi. You could go yourself, Yemi. As a matter of fact, I want you to know you're the biggest piece of shit I personally know. And that I'm going to tell everybody about you and how much of a piece of shit you are. I'm going to go around, I'm going to run your name into the dirt. You dirty scumbag mother. Go yourself, Yemi. I hope you wake up every morning and look in the mirror and see yourself as a piece of shit slave. Because that's all you are, you fucking nigger. Big fucking nigger. I want you to record this. Send this to all the police buddies, you slave nigger. That's what you are. You're a nigger to the data centers. You're a nigger to the whoever's giving you money, you little nigger. Fuck you slave bitch motherfucker. You know what? Maybe we should get a weekly cross burning on your fucking yard. Maybe that'll teach you to be fucking humble, you little nigger bitch motherfucker. You I want my life back. You fucking took it. You, Paulus, and the Attorney General. Fuck you! I almost forgot to tell you. I'm done with Colorado. I'm fucking leaving the state. And I'm gonna get Peter Thiel, dude. It's gonna be the last fucking thing I do. I swear to fucking God. And it's all your fault, Yemi. All your fucking fault. You fucking let the DA sabotage me. You let the court fuck me over every chance it got. The Attorney General doesn't care about my fucking business. Fine. I'm going to take all my fucking money and bounce. I'm going to go, and I'm going to do what needs doing to protect the Constitution that you fucking bunch of cocksucker motherfuckers won't. Simple. End of story. Alex Tuck, Peter Thiel, I'm coming for you! Yemi, you can kiss my ass. You can go suck a fucking dick. As much as Peter Thiel doesn't like black people, I'm going to tell him he's a f***er too. You just watch. Just wait. Just fucking wait. Let's see how much further you can push me. You bunch of fucking cocksuckers.
Welcome to Wayne's World, rising above the noise and confusion.
It's Wayne's Word.
Oh.
Welcome to this episode of Wayne's Word. I'm Wayne, and today we have with us Wayne.
I'm Wayne. And
no,
you're Wayne.
I'm Wayne.
How
You
are
must
ya?
be Garth. Well, let's party on. Actually, I'm Wayne Laugesen, your host, and this is Wayne Williams, the former Secretary of State of Colorado, and now the mayor's chief of staff here in Colorado Springs. He's the chief of staff for Mayor Yemi Mobolade, and I just want to embarrass you up front, if I could. You ran against the mayor and lost. Now you work for the mayor, but you make 3 times more money than he does. Something like that, right?
I'm not sure it's 3 times, but I do make more than if I had won.
I believe it's about $270,000. This is public record, so
It is.
I'm not saying anything out of that like exposes you that you're not already exposed. And I think the mayor makes $129,000, which is kind of a low end executive salary. And I don't know why it works that way, but good for you. That worked out very well for you, didn't it?
So that would be double, not triple, just for the record.
Okay, come on. I exaggerate a little bit for effect.
Well, here's the reality. So there were a number of us that ran for mayor 3 years ago. It was a hotly contested race. Yemi and I made the runoff. He won. I believe in the election system we have in America. I believe in this democratic republic. I don't always like the results. There have been many times in my 50 years of involvement in politics that I haven't liked particular results. But I respect those results, Wayne. And
Yes.
So part of what I did what you do. I called him up. I congratulated him on election night. I wound up for some reason, my event that night didn't go that long. Hard to imagine why.
I love those losing election parties. That's a real drag. There's lots of food left over, though.
And we had good food. We had good food. I had a friend that helped provide that. And so as I'm driving home, I'm going, I could actually try to exhibit some class and go over and congratulate him in person. And so I did. I stopped by his event that night. I congratulated him. I saw some weird looks as I walked in because that's not normally what people do. It's not conventional. But I thought it was important for this community to come together. We have elections. We fight over issues. But then our responsibility as leaders in our community is to come together for the good of the people. And so I began to work with Yemi on an infrastructure solutions team that I helped co-chair, was serving on his advisory council with having discussions with him on various issues as they came to pass. And then ultimately, when there was a resignation from his former chief of staff, people in the community began to reach out to me and to the mayor and say, we think the two of you should start to work together in a bigger capacity.
It's a great outcome. And I will have to say, during that campaign, I never heard you have a bad thing to say about your opponent.
So,
nor did he about you. It was a very classy campaign.
Well, and we talked about differences and issues, and I think that's fair. That's what you're supposed to do. But, since it's our semi-quincentennial, if I got the word right, as a nation, let me talk about the first congressional race.
Okay, first, before we do that, real quick,
you're not going to let me go back. I'm a history geek. So
okay. I just want to say we'll go right to that. But I want to say we are here primarily today to talk about the mayor's security and a recent article that showed up in the Gazette, which I worked there for 17 years. Great publication. I don't have a bad thing to say about it, but it called into question. This was an audit that called into question some sort of personal use, or so it was implied that the mayor was using his security detail for personal gain. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. And Wayne's a good person to talk about that. Wayne and I have something in common in that we are both lawyers. I, having graduated from Wayne's World Autodidactic Night School of Law, and I'm the only one who's ever been admitted nor gotten through that very difficult course. And
that's an impressive qualification you have there, sir.
Why, thank you. And yours isn't much less because you graduated from the University of Virginia, which is the number 4 law school in the country, I believe, tied with who's it tied with?
Well, it all depends how you look at it. It is a very good law school, Mr. Jefferson's University, as we call it, as it is one of 3 things on Thomas Jefferson's tombstone as founder of the University of Virginia.
That's right. Great school. So you're a good one to have on to talk about the mayor's security detail. But let's go back to the first congressional district first.
So this is the very first election we have for the U.S. Congress, and James Madison, the father of the Constitution, is running for Congress. Patrick Henry, who opposed the Constitution, recruited a war hero, Colonel James Monroe, to run against him. And so Madison and Monroe run against each other. They vigorously debate because Monroe opposed the Constitution, believed a Bill of Rights was absolutely necessary. Madison did not believe that a parchment document like that would actually be helpful and believed that the Constitution was fine as it was. And so they're fighting over this, so much so that they actually, one of them gets frostbite as their debate goes long into the night in cold weather. But here's the other part that's going on. They would travel together from debate to debate. They would sometimes, because there weren't many Motel 6s at the time, stay in the same hotel room or stay in the same room as after they debated. And so they fought hard on the seminal issues. They had opposite polar views. And yet Madison writes to Jefferson, who's over in France at the time, and says, "It was my misfortune to have run against Colonel Monroe. Our friendship was in no wise diminished by doing so." It's not an exact quote, but it's pretty close. And of course, later, Madison picks Monroe as his Secretary of State. And ultimately, he becomes the successor to Madison as the 4th and then 5th president of the United States. So these are two people who disagreed but worked together afterwards. And that's what we've got to get back to as a nation. You look at what Lincoln did, where he brought in opponents into his cabinet. You look at what Franklin Roosevelt did during World War II, brought in a Republican as a Secretary of War. So we have a history in our nation of trying to work together. And frankly, it's what we need to do more of as a community, as a state, and as a nation.
Wouldn't it be fantastic? And that's what we're seeing right here in Colorado Springs right now, with you two working together, who both wanted to defeat the other.
We did.
Not long ago.
We sent mailers out. We did ads. But, you know, the people spoke. And so the responsibility then is to work together for the citizens of our community, for the taxpayers of our community. And that's something I believe very strongly in, Wayne.
That's great. Well, listen, I want to get to the topic that I invited you in here for, and we can talk about a lot of other stuff. We have all day. But I want to get to this. George, could you cue up these are some messages recently left on Mayor Yemi Mobolade's answering machine. And I want everyone to hear this before we begin talking about the mayor's security detail and what the audit found and what some of his political opponents are trying to exploit for political gain. George, are you ready to play those?
Yeah, you're going to have to put your headphones
Let's
on.
put
if you want
headphones
to listen to
on,
it,
Wayne, so we can listen to them. And I want to hear your reaction to these.
Hey, just so you know, before I go off, I want you to know what it is. That way we can be clear here. I was the business owner who you Yemi. You could go yourself, Yemi. As a matter of fact, I want you to know you're the biggest piece of shit I personally know. And that I'm going to tell everybody about you and how much of a piece of shit you are. I'm going to go around, I'm going to run your name into the dirt. You dirty scumbag mother. Go yourself, Yemi. I hope you wake up every morning and look in the mirror and see yourself as a piece of shit slave. Because that's all you are, you fucking nigger. Big fucking nigger. I want you to record this. Send this to all the police buddies, you fucking slave nigger. That's what you are. You're a nigger to the data centers. You're a nigger to the fucking whoever's giving you money, you little fucking nigger. Fuck you, you slave bitch motherfucker. You know what? Maybe we should get a weekly cross burning on your fucking yard. Maybe that'll teach you to be fucking humble, you little nigger bitch motherfucking cunt. You fuck. I want my life back. You fucking took it. You, Paulus, and the Attorney General. Fuck you.
Okay. So that's one of two. Any thoughts on that, Wayne? I mean, I find that just about as disgusting as anything I've ever heard in my entire life.
It is incredibly disgusting. It is vile. It is racist. It is not an acceptable dialogue. And when you start threatening a crime, such as burning a cross in a black man's yard, that's threatening a crime. It is a concern. And that type of attitude is one that causes us to be concerned as a community and causes law enforcement to say, we need to make sure that the mayor is protected.
Okay, George, can you play the second, the follow-up that was left, I believe, shortly after that message, since this caller wasn't satisfied with that?
I almost forgot to tell you, I'm done with Colorado. I'm fucking leaving the state. And I'm going to get Peter Thiel, dude. It's going to be the last fucking thing I do. I swear to fucking God. And it's all your fault, Yemi. All your fucking fault. You fucking let the DA sabotage me. You let the court fuck me over every chance it got. The Attorney General doesn't care about my fucking business. Fine. I'm going to take all my fucking money and bounce. I'm going to go and I'm going to do what needs done to protect the Constitution that you fucking bunch of cocksucker motherfuckers won't. Simple. End of story. Alex Tuck, Peter Thiel, I'm coming for you! Yummy, you can kiss my ass. You can go suck a fucking dick. As much as Peter Thiel doesn't like black people, I'm going to tell him he's a too. You just watch. Just wait. Just fucking wait. Let's see how much further you can push me. You bunch of fucking cocksuckers!
Now, I doubt that this person knows Mayor Yemi or that they've ever met. This is just someone who it sounds like could be anyone out there who snapped. I do happen to I've done some research and I happen to have his phone number. I'm going to try to give him a call right now. Let me dial it up here and see if we can get a hold of this guy. He says his name.
Pull up the number and then I'll call when I'm connected.
Okay. Let's see. I have the number here. I'm not going to say it. Okay, let's see if we can get this guy on the phone.
Thank you for calling. Sorry we missed you. Please leave a detailed message with your name, number, and how we can help after the tone, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you.
Hey, this message is if you're listening, pick up. My name is Wayne. I'd like to talk to you about a couple of messages you left for Mayor Yemi Mobolade recently. And if you're there, pick up. Otherwise, give us a call back. I would really like to talk to you about those messages. I do a podcast, and I want to hear you talk about what you said on those messages. I find them quite disturbing personally, but maybe you have a rationale for leaving them that you'd like to discuss. Again, my name's Wayne. Give me a call. If you call during the show, we can talk. Thanks. Bye. Okay, so we'll see if this person calls back. It seems to be his voice. Seems to be the business that's connected to the name that I found connected to this number. And so I think we've got the right guy. I would love for him to call back.
The guy who left Mayor Yemi those messages did eventually get back to us. He responded to us on Facebook Messenger. If you want to see those messages, go to our Substack at Wayne's Word.
And let's talk about this article in the Gazette. Again, this is a city auditor's report. I don't have any issue against the Gazette here for publishing this, although I want to make sure that people who watch and listen to my podcast understand what it's like to be the mayor of Colorado Springs, and you're black and you're from Nigeria and you get phone calls like that. So this city auditor's report, it says the auditor's office reported 5 instances in 2025 when the security detail accompanied Mobolade on personal trips before or between city events. 2 of the incidents involved making stops to pick up dry cleaning before heading to a city event. Oh my goodness, we wouldn't want. I mean, we're going to go broke if the mayor's security detail stops at a dry cleaner before a city event. I don't know how they're supposed to protect him if they can't accompany him to a dry cleaner to pick up his clothes for an event. The other 3 incidents involved Mobolade's children. Oh, and of course, we wouldn't want them to be safe now. According to the report, the mayor was accompanied by the security detail to pick them up from school before going to a city building, and the detail traveled with them between an elementary school graduation and a city event. The report found that all the stops were incidental to official travel and that the security officers had not been sent for trips on Mobolade's behalf. And let's see, the other allegations in this report were that the mayor's wife drove a city vehicle for approximately 150 miles in 2 months last year. Okay, the city found the trips were reported after the fact. Well, yeah, it's kind of hard to report I don't know. I report trips after the fact. I take a trip and then I report it and I put in if I want to be reimbursed or whatever. And were appropriately listed as a fringe benefit to the Internal Revenue Service. Now, none of this comes across as abusive or excessive or anything of the sort to me. In fact, after reading that report and knowing what Yemi goes through, what the mayor goes through, being who he is, the mayor of a lot of people think, I tell people this stuff, and they go, oh, it's a small town, nobody cares, this is, okay, I guess you can view it that way because we're in the shadow of Denver, but this is a city of of about 500,000 people, a metro area approaching 1 million people. It's the 39th largest city in the country. And I've been to Nigeria, and Yemi Mobolade may not be a household name in the United States, but he is in Nigeria. He's also known as a Christian minister. And if anyone has been paying attention to the news or listening to various celebrities, such as who are the celebrities who've been speaking out? The rap star.
Nicki Minaj.
And Bill Maher. Bill Maher is, he's always been known as sort of a left-wing activist, but he's been speaking up for Christians in Nigeria because they are being, there's a genocide going on in Nigeria. So I don't know. I just think there's a pretty good case to make for a more robust security detail for this particular mayor, given the fact that he is black and he is Christian and he's from Nigeria. Those all sort of weigh against his safety. And we live in what is now referred to as the assassination culture ever since the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And we have a letter here from the President of the United States Conference of Mayors, David Holt, the mayor of Oklahoma City, warning cities that they need to upgrade mayoral security. And this is the Police Executive Research Forum warning that mayors should train mayors, their families, and their staff on basic situational awareness regarding security concerns. When possible, mayors should avoid traveling in a predictable manner. In other words, we shouldn't advertise where the mayor is going to be a day from now or 2 days from now. When possible, mayors should avoid publicly sharing their schedules far in advance. I mean, so I want to know what you think, Wayne, other Wayne. By the way, we need to fix our hats here. So let's do that now. I got Wayne and I a hat. Since we're both Waynes, this makes this a very special occasion. Take your pen and mark out the L, Wayne, on your Wayne's World hat, and then we'll put these on. And then we can get back to the serious discussion of, that worked out really well, of the mayor's security.
You got to show the camera. Hold it closer to the camera, Dad.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, so that's what we have now. I'm going to take my headphones off.
Point at that camera. No, this. Yeah.
I'm going to take my headphones off, but I'll put it back on if the racist calls back in. Nice. So Wayne, given that we live in what is now often referred to in the media as the assassination culture, how do you feel about people who may want to run against the mayor, or, people who have an issue with the mayor? I know there was one city council member who spoke out against, saying this was, some sort of a terrible abuse of taxpayer funds. How do you feel about that, given the assassination culture that we live in right now?
So let me talk first about some of what's going on in American society. And really, this is the second period of time that I can think of a large number of assassination attempts. First of those during the 60s, when you had John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, all assassinated. And with respect to Malcolm X, the same type of racial epithets being shouted by the individual who perpetrated that crime. And so but in recent years, Wayne, we've had a similar outbreak with the assassination of a Minnesota legislator and their spouse, and an attempt against another Minnesota legislator and their spouse.
And these people certainly didn't rise to the level of public. They weren't as publicly known as the mayor of Colorado Springs by any means.
Right. So in El Paso County, we got 9 state reps and 5 state senators. There's one mayor of Colorado Springs. that represents 500,000 people roughly. So much more prominent than some of these. Some of the other assassination attempts that were obviously Charlie Kirk, who was not an elected official at all, but was someone who was vocal about speaking out for issues. You've had more assassination attempts than I can count against our current president.
Charlie Kirk hits real close to home for me because the day before he was assassinated, my wife and I were planning a trip to Armenia. We were going there for a prayer breakfast that she played a fairly big role in planning and organizing, and she was making travel arrangements for Charlie, who was going to be the keynote speaker, and I was going to get to spend quite a bit of time with Charlie on the way to Armenia, and on the way back from Armenia, and the next day he was shot in the neck, and the rest is history.
So when you see things like that occurring, when you then have a threat, someone says, "I'm coming for you," and utters the same type of racial epithets and other things that are frankly shocking in their vulgarity, but similar to what has taken place with respect to other assassination attempts that have occurred in our past, it does cause you pause. And I would note, so in that context, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, as you mentioned, and let me, as well as the Police Executive Research Forum, have both issued statements saying we need to be more cautious. We need to exercise more precautions. So I'm a former statewide elected official for Colorado. I did not receive threats at anywhere near the level that my successor has received. In fact, someone's actually been convicted of making threats against my successor. We did not see that level half a decade ago, but you see it increasingly today. And so when you say, the data is alarming. According to the Impact Project's Threats to Public Servants dashboard, violent threats against local public servants have increased over 2,000% since 2015. So just to put that in context, that's a 20-fold increase. That is a tremendously different situation than you had in past years. And so if you look at what happens with a security detail then, which is typically the chief law enforcement official that's making the decisions concerning a security detail, that security detail protects the individual throughout what they do. And so when our governor goes to a soccer game, when the mayor of Denver goes to an event, that security detail is there. And the same is true for many of the events. We actually have less security here in Colorado Springs because we try to balance, the police chief balances the needs with the relative risks, and so makes decisions. But that risk doesn't end when someone stops at a dry cleaner or walks into a grocery store. And it's important to note that in no instance was the security detail asked to carry the groceries or pick up the dry cleaning. Instead, they are simply there to protect the mayor while he does that task. And he doesn't cease to be the mayor because he needs to stop, pick up his kids, or take some other action that is incidental. And the auditor's report noted it was incidental to the use. Now, what the auditor's report did say is there should be a policy. And one of the things, I became chief of staff, I think, April 20th. So that week, I began to craft a policy, working with police, working with others to address that, to do exactly what the audit committee said we needed to do, which is to adopt a policy. We've done that. It clarifies that indeed the protective detail may accompany the mayor to something, but they are not going to do any personal tasks whatsoever in context with that. So if he is picking up dry cleaning, they will not carry the dry cleaning. They will not pay for the dry cleaning. They may walk in to provide the security.
I would hope.
I would think that would be a normal process. I don't know how I don't know how you provide security for someone and say, but in this context, you're not the mayor, you're not the president, you're not the governor, you're not whomever it might be you're providing protection for. I mean, you know this. One of your neighbors was off duty as the head of our Department of Corrections.
That's right.
And was killed at his house.
Mm-hmm.
So he wasn't at a Department of Corrections facility at the time.
He was in a small, what I like to consider, George laughs at me, but our small mountain village, up north of here, where we like to think that we don't have crime and we don't have assassinations and that type of thing. And yet a guy shows up at his door looking like he's delivering a pizza, and the next thing you know, he's Tom Clements is dead.
And the threat doesn't cease to exist because it's after hours or because I'm stopping to grab a sandwich along the way or whatever else the case may be. The most, one of the more famed, it might be giving a speech. You look at some of the assassination attempts that took place. It might not even be official business at all. You look at the attempt against President Trump in Pennsylvania. He was at a political event. Is it still an obligation to provide security when there is a threat, when there is a risk to a public official? And I believe that that is an important part for the police chief to evaluate, right? It's not my job as chief of staff. It is not anyone else's job to do that other than the law enforcement official who's the one that's got to make that call. And what is the right level of security? When is the right level of security? At what stages is it going to take place? And obviously, President of the United States is a very different thing. So there's not just a single person showing up for a few hours when it's the president. There is a whole agency that is charged with that protection. It is the policy that we adopted provides the police chief's going to decide what, who, how. It just does specify that the personal tasks are going to be performed by the individual, not by a protective detail.
And you talk about what type of security detail the president has. It's obviously the best in the world, and yet we have seen two people who you basically are not, these are not the leaders of foreign countries or foreign terror cells. These are not sophisticated people. Twice in the last year, two people of low sophistication have come very close to taking out our president.
Well, and let me be clear, the level of risk for a mayor is not the same as a president.
Of course.
Nor is the level of protection that is provided. But to say that there is no need for that, for any level of protection at all, given the climate today, given the recommendations from national organizations, is irresponsible.
Well, and given these recordings that we played, and they're heavily redacted. The recordings we played, they are heavily redacted. So they're worse than what anyone in my audience is actually hearing. Okay, they're horrifying. And given those, I used to be the editorial pages editor of the Gazette, the main newspaper here in Colorado Springs. I ran the editorial board meetings, and if I were doing that today, I would be trying to persuade the editorial board to call for stricter security, to spend more on the mayor's security, especially given that type of message. And those certainly aren't the only ones that have been left for the mayor. And this is someone who is clearly not well. This is someone who appears to have snapped and could be capable of anything. And I don't want our city to ever become one that is known for any type of public official being targeted and harmed in any way.
Well, and if you look at where Charlie Kirk was assassinated, this was not a high-risk location by most definitions. It was a few blocks away from where my wife grew up in Orem, Utah, at Utah Valley University. So it's not something labeled as a high crime area by any means. Those risks exist, and it is our responsibility to provide a certain level of protection. But I'm not, as I said, I'm not the one that makes those decisions under the policy we've adopted. It is the police chief. I will note that one of the things the auditor said is there should be a policy. So we have adopted that policy in compliance with what needs to be done. And it provides for some very strict rules, providing that the police chief makes the decisions. The officers are there for security. They don't do personal tasks.
Yeah, and nobody's asking that they do that. There's there's no rationale for that whatsoever. And I don't think anyone has ever accused the mayor of having them do personal tasks.
That's correct.
So what are the other agendas on your plate right now as in your new job as the mayor's chief of staff? Tell us what it's like. How do you like the new gig?
It is a very demanding job. It is, we have a large city, and we have lots of demands, and we do that on a very frugal income. So in terms of the last report, and this may be slightly dated, but out of the 100 largest cities, we were in the bottom 5 or so of income per citizen in terms of government income. And I'm fine with us being near the bottom because I'm a fiscal conservative. But what that means is we've got to figure out how to make those dollars go as far as possible. So our security for the mayor is not as elaborate. Our spending on other aspects is not as elaborate as other places. It's very frugal. And that's what I think taxpayers of this community have a right to expect. What that means is we have to choose between good things because we're not in the area of, oh, we've got all this frivolous stuff that doesn't need to be done. One of the things the Taxpayer Bill of Rights does is it forces government to make those choices just like individuals have to make choices. And so we as a community are living with a budget that's been flat for 3 years at the city. Now, I know the state has all of these statements about how they're austere and having to cut, but the state budget's gone up over $2 billion a year every year for the last few years.
That's right.
Well, the city has been flat. And so I don't know how things work for most people, but most businesses, most individuals that I know aren't talking about, oh, things are really tough when it's going up by billions a year like the state budget has.
They just keep raising fees on every human activity imaginable. That's why.
And to say that, that's what the state does. The city has taken a different approach. We have instead made cuts. The last budget adopted by city council and signed by the mayor reduced our workforce. We deal with furlough days where our employees who did not get a pay raise are instead asked to take days off without pay in order to balance the city's budget. And that's because we've made those tough fiscal choices. As we go forward, part of what we're doing right now is working on next year's budget and trying to say, how can we best protect the taxpayers? How do we make sure that we retain and attract good employees to serve the taxpayers and serve our community? And those are critical factors when we have law enforcement personnel, when we have firefighters who are paid below the level of some of our neighbors. In fact, including some individuals who might be in this room with us today, who might work for a department that in some cases might actually pay more in the monument area than we do in Colorado Springs. And so we want to have good people responding when you have that emergency call. I hope no one ever has to call 911, but that's not the reality. I've made that call when my neighbor's house was on fire years ago. I want well-trained people who are dedicated to our community respond, and they did. But we've got to make sure that we attract and retain those employees who serve our community, and that's a key part of what we do going forward in a budget. We're also looking at a host of other things, in terms of what I've been involved in. We're looking at making sure that we get things running in a balance at the airport. And so between the the business development park there and the airport, making sure we've got the right balance, making sure that we're aligning that with the goals and purposes of the city. Colorado Springs Airport provides a key economic component of our community. And so continuing to work and make sure that is successful is an important part of what we're doing. We have a different auditor report saying, hey, we need to make some changes, and we've begun to make those changes. It was one of the first things that we did when I became chief of staff at the city. We're also trying to make sure that we provide for the other services that are a key factor for this community that we all love. Many of us are here because of our outdoor activities, our parks, and so working to provide the funding they need is all part of this budget process that we're engaged in. We had a meeting with City Council earlier this week talking about that budgeting process as we work with them, trying to make sure that our priorities reflect the needs and concerns of our community. So that's all part of it. Another part of it is working with our transportation and infrastructure people to make sure we deliver on the promises in 2C and the Pikes Peak RTA. You know, one of the differences with our community versus sometimes state ballot issues or others is we're very specific about where money's going to go. And so when we did issue 2C, listed specific roads that are going to be addressed and making sure we deliver on those promises. When we passed the Pikes Peak RTA extension with almost 80% of the vote, there are a list of projects we're going to do, and you see those underway right now on Mark Shuffle. You see work begin on the process with respect to the North Powers extension that will connect it to I-25, and a host of other projects around our community. Repaving Union and Circle, portions of those major roads, but also getting into the neighborhoods. And so there are a number of neighborhood streets. And if you go to the city's website, you can look up what that schedule is, what those streets are that were voted on, and you can track the progress. We're also in the middle of a pothole blitz right now because we have, and this is part that when you move here from places that either don't freeze or freeze and stay frozen, you don't realize the difference our freeze-thaw cycle imposes on the roads.
These are not potholes, they're craters.
Well, and we're working on those. And so the city app, which you can download, and is something that enables us to quickly respond to a pothole complaint, hopefully. And if someone lets us know it's there, we can get to it before it becomes a crater, so it's easier to do and less expensive. And so the sooner we know, the quicker we can respond to it. And so and
it's not just the springs. You go to any city in Colorado and there are craters simply because of that freeze-thaw cycle. People who don't live here don't realize it can be 70 degrees one day in January, and later that night it's 10 degrees.
Right.
Or below zero.
It's always funny when I'm talking to family members, Wayne, about, you know, they have this little 20-degree range. Their temperature stays between day and night. We've got 50-degree swings. And I love it because I like it cool at night and I like it warm during the day. And we've got what I think is one of the best climates in the world.
Oh, definitely. But you can't paint your house here in this climate. I've tried that. The freeze thaw, I mean, the paint cannot expand and contract fast enough. It just starts falling off the house.
So there are challenges we have in our paving, but we're working on it. And so I'd encourage people to go to the app. You can report it accurately, and the sooner you report it, the quicker we can get a team out to do that. It's not instantaneous because we are also fiscally prudent, and so we're going to do a whole bunch of them in that same area at the same time, as opposed to having a crew driving from Briargate down to the down to downtown, to the west side, to Rock Rimmon, and then over to the Powers Corridor. We're going to have different crews that are hitting different areas on different days.
And Powers Corridor is going to become sort of like a beltway almost around the city, correct? It's going to be built more to freeway standards than it is now.
So
ultimately, and then connect to I-25.
When I was a commissioner and one of the leaders over at the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments,
county commissioner, yes,
county commissioner, we adopted a an environmental assessment for Powers Boulevard or State Highway 21, and it called for the replacement of the stoplights along Powers with bridges and interchanges. And we have been working on a slow process because it's a state highway, with first Platte, then Woodman, then the Briargate and Union near the hospital, Research, and now Airport. And there's a problem because of the state's priorities. They're in their next plan they're adopting right now. There is not a single dollar for constructing the next interchange on Powers. And so I think that's certainly an issue that people can ask candidates that are running for a state office. Is this your plan? Or are you going to ignore our community? And it's different because our community is still growing. We're not growing fast, but we are growing. Whereas other communities are losing people. Denver, Boulder, people are moving away.
Well, that's right. And I spent, George, our producer, our main producer here, George was born. He's a Boulder native. We lived there for 17 years. When we first lived there, we had a 2-bedroom home that was exactly the size of a double wide mobile home, although it was a stick-built regular house. That thing is worth between $1 and $2 million right now, and it's one of the smallest houses in town. It really is the size of a double wide mobile home, and not in one of the better parts of town either. People there are no firefighters who live in Boulder, and our producer here is a firefighter, paramedic in Monument, and it's too expensive to live there, so he lives in Colorado Springs. So that's one thing you can say about Colorado Springs is our teachers, our firefighters, our doctors, they live here. They don't have to commute 40 miles into the city.
And it's important to have a community that has options for folks. And part of what we have to do is work with folks at the state who sometimes impose laws that drive up costs unnecessarily. And so I'll give you an example. My son lives here. He bought a new home recently, and I'm doing the walkthrough with him, Wayne. And we get down to the basement and they show me the ventilation system they have built for the house. Now, I've never lived in a house with a ventilation system because I've never had to comply with the incredibly stringent energy insulation requirements that make it so tight that you can't breathe inside your own home.
Right, and those have come down from the state. That's
state requirement. And so my son built to have it over insulated and then paid for an insulation system or a ventilation system to bypass this, and then pays for the electricity to run the ventilation system to bypass that. And if that sounds like a logical plan to you, you're not me. Because the fact of the matter is there are certain standards that need to be there for public health, public safety. But when you impose ridiculous standards that drive up the cost of a house, making it hard for regular people to afford a home, there's a problem. And so as one of the things that we look at in our community is housing attainability. Can you obtain a house? And part of what we try to do is work with processes to make it so that our side, it's easy to do that. One of my family members built a home in a different city in a different state. It took 3 or 4 years to get it done because of all the red tape you had to go through. We have a regional building department here that's efficient, that provides same-day inspections, that tries to make it so you can actually get things done. And that's another example, by the way, of good regional cooperation, because that regional building department works with the different towns, the cities, and the county. So it's much more efficient as opposed to having, 9 or 10 different regional building authorities that you have to go to.
Yeah, that's right. And I will say, I'm the father. Dee Dee and I are parents of 6 children, all boys, and they're almost all adults now. We have one teenager at home still, but I have a 23-year-old who he's married and has a child and just bought a house in Colorado Springs. Our main producer here and his lovely bride, they just bought a house in Colorado Springs. And but still, the average age of a home of a first-time home purchaser in Colorado Springs is 40.
And that's very different than it was just 20 years ago. And a number of the issues are because we have driven up, particularly at the state level, the cost of housing. There are other impacts that are there and other prices, some of which are market driven, some of which are interest rate driven. But one of the things that I think are good questions to ask candidates who are running for state office is, what are you going to do about these overbroad, overprescriptive requirements that come out of the state?
Yeah, we need to put a stop to that. But with the legislature and the governor we're likely to have next, it's not looking good, is it?
Well, now you get into specific candidates, and at that point I say I'm not involved in those discussions in my role as chief of staff.
But I want to bring up one more controversial subject before we go. We can talk about anything else you want to, but I want to, the Ford Stadium, or the Ford Amphitheater. I love the Ford Amphitheater. I've been to concerts there. It's a wonderful amenity in our community. But you guys get a lot of complaints. I like to call these people, I'm sorry, people are going to hate me. Everybody who lives anywhere near that amphitheater is going to hate me, but I think they're a bunch of fuss budgets who can't put up with a little bit of noise, so that a whole bunch of people can have a few hours of fun at night listening to, some of the world's greatest musicians. You can attract any musician to that amphitheater. What do you say to the people around those neighborhoods who are constantly, they just file complaints all day long with the city? I'm sure you hear most of them.
So first, I want to emphasize that this, except for the immediately adjacent area, the amphitheater is in compliance with state and local requirements. There is a noise hardship exception that's granted, and I think there's one apartment building that's almost immediately adjacent to the amphitheater, and it's that area, the Polaris Point specific area, for which and I believe it's Polaris Point. If I'm wrong, I'll correct it and let you know.
No, that's right. And there is an apartment right next door, and you sign a contract when you move in that you're not going to gripe about the concerts.
And actually, the complaints haven't come from there. And so can you hear some residual noise outside there? Yes, but it's within the limits provided by state and law. And so we have monitoring stations that check this out, that monitor it to make sure it's in compliance with the law. When it first opened, the mitigation was not in place like it is today. But Wayne, the reality is that weather patterns can make it so you can hear some concerts depending on what the weather pattern is. But according to the monitoring that we do, that is scientifically based, it has not exceeded the legal limits. And so can you hear it? Yes, you can also hear a car when it drives by. Mm-hmm. You can hear a motorcycle when it goes by.
It's an urban environment. There's all sorts of noises.
It's at the corner of Powers and I-25.
You can hear the traffic on I-25 for quite a distance from I-25.
It's important to balance, and so that's why we do the monitoring, to make sure it's there, to make sure that it stays within compliance. But the noise hardship permit that the city granted was only for that immediately adjacent area. It did not cover other parts. And I recognize that folks have a right to say this is different than what it was when I moved here, and that's true. We have additional roads beyond. I remember someone on Hodgen saying, "I wish it were just a gravel road again." And when we were doing an RTA project to improve the safety and mobility on Hodgen Road, there are changes that have taken place. It is part of a commercial district, and we continue to work and to ensure that the mitigation that takes place is sufficient to meet the requirements of both our local requirements and state law.
Okay. Listen, one more thing, and that is, most of the time that I've been in Colorado, and Dee Dee and I moved here childless in 1993 from Washington, D.C. And, most of the time that I've been here, you have been in politics and you've been known as a standard conservative Republican as you've moved up the ranks in Colorado politics. I don't know that you are considered that by today's standards of the Colorado Republican Party, which is pretty far out there. And but I think Mayor Mobolade, a lot of people they ask me, because I've had him on the podcast twice, and we go to lunch once in a while, and I'm not taking a position in the mayor's race or anything like that, but they ask me, is he a liberal? Is he a conservative? Is he a Republican, Democrat? Well, he's neither a Republican nor a Democrat. But I say, I believe from my perspective, he's more conservative than he tends to get credit for from conservatives, in that we don't have 45,000 illegal immigrants who he has welcomed into the city, unlike our neighbor to the north in Denver. Our homelessness situation, the homeless people on the streets with tents in parks and on sidewalks is decreasing, not increasing. In so many ways, he seems to be governing like a relatively conservative mayor. And as one who has been known as a conservative Republican in this state for most of your career, I'd like to know your thoughts on that, especially since he beat you in the mayoral race. Turned out pretty well for you, by the way.
So let's talk about first. You and I have known each other for a long time, but not every person knows my history. I went to my first Republican meeting when I was about 15 years old. My high school graduation trip was to Virginia Beach as a delegate to the state Republican convention. I've been a national delegate or alternate 4 times. I chaired the Republican Party here in 1997 through 99, which is the only time we've elected a new Republican governor in my lifetime in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
And our margin here when I was chair was 38,000 votes, and Bill Owens won statewide by 8,000 votes. So we gave him a beautiful picture of Garden of the Gods with those 2 numbers on it to always let him know where that margin came from. And I've gone through the caucus and assembly process and proud to have been nominated by the Republican Party 5 times. So I am a strong Republican. I always have been. I always will be. My party, like every party, has people of diverse views in it. The only way you can get to 51% is to have some people who don't agree with you all the time. And that's the reality with the party to which I am and always have been affiliated. And so I'm a Republican. Mayor Yemi Mobolade is a registered unaffiliated voter. He is neither registered as a Republican nor a Democrat. In terms of where he is philosophically, I think that's for him to address rather than me to characterize. But I think if you look at how we govern our city within our means, without doing excessive fees, with having a flat budget, with prioritizing public safety, I think there are a number of things in that that make me feel like, yes, I can work with this individual. We may not agree on everything, but when it comes to prioritizing public safety and infrastructure as purposes of local government, those are things that we can work closely on, that we agree on. And I believe that's, that, at least for me, that was a key issue. And am I going to accept this offer to work with the mayor? Because if he was, I'm going to defund the police or I'm going to turn our roads to gravel, I would be going, I can't support that. I can't work together on that. But can we work together to address public safety? And so, yes, you've seen some key response times on 9/11 calls be reduced, meaning that we get there quicker than we used to do. You've seen some key crime statistics drop. So I want to continue to work with him, with Chief Vasquez, with respect to our law enforcement, with our sheriff, with our district attorney, all of whom are part of that law enforcement community that's focused on trying to make sure that we protect our community. And so those are values that I share and believe in. Do Yemi and I disagree on some things? Yeah, we ran a campaign and we offered competing visions. Ultimately, the people made their decision. And Wayne, as we end this, we live in the greatest democratic republic in the history of the world. We celebrate our 250th anniversary this year. And I am thankful for that opportunity to serve this community. And I respect the election process. Do I wish I'd won? Sure. Yeah, I worked really hard.
I don't know. I think in some ways, as we discussed up front.
Well, wait.
I know it's not about money.
My decisions have never been about money,
No.
right? I went from being clerk and recorder to Secretary of State for about
where you make $60,000 a year or something to that effect,
68,
right?
but I took a $19,000 pay cut. I then went, and by the way, when I was buying a new home, the first mortgage company said, well, your pay just went down 19,000. We trend lined this. You don't qualify for the house. Had to find someone that was willing to support, a lender that was willing to support public service. And then I served on city council for the princely sum of $6,250 a year,
Yes.
$120 a month.
They're so overpaid.
So,
yeah.
So it's never been for me about that. I've been a volunteer in so many different campaigns, different organizations. It's about trying to make this community better.
And I've always known that about you. I joke. But,
and so, am I committed to trying to make this community as great as possible? Yeah, I've been doing that since 1994 when Bob Isaac asked me to serve as a volunteer on the Colorado Springs Housing Authority Board. And after serving on city council, I then volunteered on the Initiative Review Commission. So we have a great community, and in part because there are people who are willing to serve. We've got a history of service with many of the men and women who served and protected us in the armed forces. They then choose to retire here. They become great volunteers. We've got a lot of religious-based and other nonprofits in our community that are all about volunteering. And so whether it's justserve.org or 'Cause I Love You or all of the other organizations, if folks want to help make a difference in our community, they don't have to run for office. They can volunteer. They can help. They can say hi to their neighbor in the grocery line. I mean, it sounds a little corny, but the reality is that this is a welcoming community. I was welcomed when I moved here in 92. So a year ahead of you. But it's the type of community that thrives because people are willing to continue that volunteerism and that help their neighbor part that has made Colorado Springs the great place that it is today.
Very good. Great discussion. Thanks for coming to the studio and spending so much time with us. Party on, Wayne. And
Party on.
Party on. You can keep your Wayne's Word now, Wayne's Word hat, or you can grant it to the mayor, whatever. I'll get him one if he wants.
Well, Wade's Word is a great thing. So, and so I appreciate the work you continue to do to get the word out into our community. So thanks, Wayne.
Well, thank you.
And thanks to your team for making this work today.
Yeah, thanks.